You're listening to Rein It In with Ash and Josh.
Are we all set? We all comfy? We all ready?
I think so.
Oh, Leanne, you're in for a right treat. I think.
Well, let's
maybe.
hope so. Guys, welcome back to episode 18 of the Rein It In podcast with Ash and Josh.
Welcome back.
The number one equestrian podcast. And today we have an amazing guest with us. We have a List 1 judge, a level 4 accredited coach. Yeah, chef to keep.
Former
chef to keep.
Former.
That's something I'm going to be able to add into it. There you go. Like that.
Yeah, you can butt in on that one. Also, ponies, juniors, and young rider selector previously as well.
Yeah.
And international coach and trainer,
Yeah.
Leanne Wall.
Welcome, Leanne.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on.
Very welcome.
Oh, this is going to be a real interesting one for me because I feel like you are like probably our most probably esteemed guest. Like
Qualified as well. Qualified
as well.
Qualified on paper.
100%.
Those letters.
We'll see. We'll soon find out. So I'm going to let Josh really take the reins on this, and I will pitch in with things that hopefully don't sound too stupid where best can.
You try not to ruin this podcast.
I'm actually really excited to see where this podcast goes as a listener and a host. So I've got a balance between the two. But I've been looking forward to having you on because I've been looking forward to hearing what you have to say and how you respond to Josh.
Oh, Josh is cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming here with us today. And yeah, for us, we wanted to put a completely different perspective on this podcast episode, hearing from a coach's perspective and also a judge's perspective on what is obviously a sport that's been close to me, dressage. I've grown up, done it my whole career, and obviously been a vital part of where you've come up and grown through, and you've been part of the teams that I was around the edges on and at a younger age. So what is it from your perspective, dressage, where is it headed?
Where is it heading with terms of the youth?
The future progression of your sort of young riders in the youth programs.
I think now there's so much structure, and whether it's regionally or nationally or internationally, there's very good stepping stones in place to tailor for all ages and all levels, and that starts regionally from 7 years old, we incorporating children that can't canter, right the way through to under 25s that are potentially riding at Grand Prix. And depending on the level that you are at will depend on the route that you take, whether you go through the regionals onto the regional academies, and then potentially you might be selected onto the national academy, which helps to bridge the gap between regional and national and the international scene. Equally, there's others that are apprentices, at a yard, obviously they're older, and they are able then through their results and competition scores, they will then look to be selected, upon which then the international scene, they also offer training days and camps, which are all headed up, in preparation for the major shows. Yeah,
and obviously I was really lucky. I had such fond memories of doing that when I was younger. It was just something that I found coming through and then making it a career for a time was that I never felt there was enough support making that transition into making it a career. What is your opinion on making that step for a lot of riders? Because there's been noticeably, I remember growing up with people doing the teams, they then end up like myself. I'm not doing the sport anymore. What is the perception of people working within British Dressage on like these young riders coming through on the teams and then giving up and moving out the sport?
I think they're certainly on the international scene with the young riders. It's a different kind of pressure, and I think the young riders, the pony riders, the junior riders put themselves mostly under the pressure to come up with the goods and do well. And I've always very much adopted the policy of you need to be the best you can be. It's the training that matters. And sometimes riders can get a little bit desperate. They're knocking at the door and they go out and they compete. Whereas actually they just need to take a breath and, do a bit of rider profiling and analyse exactly where they're at and pick one or two movements and devise some exercises that can make one or two little points of their training better, so they achieve an extra half mark, as opposed to panicking and trying to improve everything at once. That tends to not work, and it can destroy the confidence in the rider and the horse. So I think also, certainly looking from the outside in, I think many regional youth riders, aspire to be on the teams, and they think if they don't get the team or make the team or represent Great Britain as a pony or a junior, it means that they're not good enough and that there is no future. That is absolutely, I do not believe, the way it is. I think it's one thing buying a schoolmaster, and obviously you've got to form a partnership with that horse and be able to train that horse. But equally, having a younger or a more limited horse and learning how to program the buttons, it's a longer route, but you learn a lot more in the process. And everybody has to remember it's their journey, and they shouldn't be comparing themselves to others. It's about them being the best that they can be and having their dreams. But as they get older and through experience, they will end up, being noticed on the competition scene locally, earning rides because they've learnt the tools to deal with the difficult horses, the challenging horses, and the horses that the owners can't necessarily get a tune out of. And then through that experience, they pick up more and more rides, and the cream then rises to the top a bit later on when they're in their mid-late 20s, early 30s. So just because somebody hasn't ridden at a young age on a team, it absolutely, in my eyes, does not mean they will not break through and ride later on at a senior level.
Yeah. Do you think that's a problem with the system, or is that just like a common theme with these riders, just always like, because I remember we had this conversation, I remember being absolutely heartbroken that I was missing out on the teams. We got a young horse and I wasn't going to be ready for juniors. And I remember having this exact same conversation with you, Jill Day, and you both said, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. And I remember Jill Day, I think she was 28 when she done her first Grand Prix.
Yeah.
She was, again, time doesn't matter. And it is the brilliant thing about dressage. You can have such a long career. Your involvement in what we've been discussing, you've been a chef to keep. You've also got judge.
Yeah.
That you've been judging as well. You've also been a coach. And then also, not only that, you then have to look after the parents, emotional needs, and the children. So you've got a different hat on in like all your involvement. What is the hardest role that you found?
The hardest role? Oh, I think every role has different challenges. So for me, coaching isn't just coaching the horse. It's not just the lesson. It's about things we've just discussed. It's about rider profiling, where you assess your strengths and your weaknesses, physically, tactically, mentally. So you get like a 360 picture of where you're at. And then again, branching off, being open enough to suggest you go to a different trainer for help with this, or you look to seek a sports psychiatrist to help you with this, or and recognizing that the whole team, like you just said, the parents, the vet, the physio, the farrier, everybody is on the same wavelength, and everybody buys into plan A and plan B and plan C. You need to be open and you need to be adaptable, because horses, they do go lame. They do suddenly, get a virus, and your competition structure needs to be planned so that you have got a plan B if necessary, and you can adapt accordingly.
How have you found putting that into, touched on that's a really brilliant thing, but how is that found by getting people to agree and creating a team environment? Because I found it, my mum probably hate me for this, but a lot of people's outside perspective of when I was coming through was it was all driven by my mum. And there has been certain environments where I've seen that firsthand that I would say, wow, that's been driven by the parents. How do you find that? Because you've said about creating a perfect team environment, that must be very difficult to create.
It has to be rider led. It has to be, it has to come from the rider. The rider, even from a young age, I believe, has to be in an environment where they're not afraid to make mistakes, where they're not afraid to experiment and learn from their mistakes. And certainly as a coach, looking back, I'd quickly hold their hand before they fell down a pothole, and go, oh, watch out, that's going to happen, splat. Whereas actually now I'm a little bit like, yeah, okay, well, next time, what are you going to do differently? So I always make sure that if they make a mistake, it absolutely does not matter. But the bottom line is at the start of, most coaching sessions, I'm like, right, what's been going well? What hasn't? What do you want to achieve from today? So it's always an agreed goal that the rider lays and gives to me. And then through the rider always being in control of what they want to work towards or aspire towards. And yes, I can help guide them and tailor them and, maybe make suggestions of slightly different avenues or different ways to overcome a problem. The rider is still the one in control, whether they're 10, whether they're 12, whether they're 14, whether they're 16, whether they're 18. And then it's their decision. And if they make the mistake, then I never make a deal. They learn from that. And then it's like, okay, we struggle with the houseboat, we take it back a step and then do this. And it's my job, as far as I'm concerned, to give them ideas and channel them and guide them and give them the tools to be able to achieve what they want to achieve, whether it's a short-term goal in that lesson or a long-term goal. It's about coming up with strategies and methods so that both horse and rider clearly understand. So if there's a problem in a lesson and they haven't quite achieved what they wanted in that lesson, I think provided they know where the area for development is and they are left with a clear plan of action as to go to how to overcome that problem and what they need to do to make it better, they do not leave the arena feeling demoralised in any way, shape or form, because it's still along their path and they've got a clear understanding of what they've got to do. It's when things go wrong and there's no clear route forward, that's when problems occur.
Does that get a bit distorted when parents are involved in that process? Imagine with you probably experienced where, like Josh says, there's the projection is actually more from the parents than it is the rider. And the forecast for that is quite obvious. You look 10 years down the line, they're not going to want to do it. They'll fall out of love with it. How would you, as a coach, and there might be coaches listening that are in that situation with, they've got a rider that they're teaching, but they know that it's because it's such a sensitive subject. You can't just go, your parent is kind of holding you back. You can't say it abruptly to that. And you've also got to be careful approaching a parent and saying you're actually getting in the way of that, because they are, as a business, they're also the one paying for a service, you would assume, as well. And they do it out of love. And I've got an acting background, and I saw it a time and time after again with dance mums that never quite made it. And so I've seen it firsthand. So how would you handle a situation like that to try and get the best out of a rider?
I think it's always got to be, like I mentioned at the beginning, if the goals are agreed and the parents are on board and everybody knows the route you're trying to follow, and if everybody's open and honest, then it normally works. And sometimes, the children will open up to me with some things and I'm like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. But then it's my job then, obviously I've got to keep the child's confidentiality to a point, but at the same time, it's about managing expectations from the parent and the parent being realistic and understanding when the child is nervous or if they're scared. But equally, I've been in a situation not so long ago, actually, where, this child was absolutely crying her eyes out. It sounds so basic, but she did not want to canter. She absolutely did not want to canter. And the mum and dad, pulled me to, and they were like, look, if you run with her and do it on a circle, she'll be okay. And this kid was absolutely adamant. And I just coaxed my way in. But if the parents hadn't informed me and guided me as to how they had been doing it at home, for me, listening to the parents actually was a massive help. And then, I can't remember what happened, but the parents went away, in which case then the child was left with me. And then before they knew it, I could see them watching from a distance. We were cantering round and round and round. And I just put my hand as if to say, stay back there. It's all going okay at the moment.
It's almost like that. Is that if there's an honest line of communication,
there has to be an open, honest line. But that, you can't just click your fingers and that happen. No. That happens over, time. And, I would never just walk into a room. We were mentioning this earlier about the word trust. I would walk into the room and I probably wouldn't trust anybody. But over a period of time, through people being open and honest, and me sometimes taking on board words that they say to me that I don't necessarily want to hear, but as far as I'm concerned, they're being straight up and as helpful to me as they possibly can. Rapport starts to develop, and then communication starts to develop. And then the communication comes a lot more from the heart and from the soul, as opposed to saying what people often want to hear. And what people often want to hear, it isn't always right.
No.
And sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow. But I've got some people, and, I value their opinion, and they have said things to me in the past that I've not wanted to hear. But I look back and I've respected them for it, and they were right. And I still pick up the phone to them now.
I think it's leading up to that point is it's almost like actions 100% are louder than words.
Yeah.
And if people are going to say they're going to do something and actually do something, or don't do it, where they stand. It's no different. You get a trainer or a coach or a member of that team going to say, we are going to approach it like this, and actually do approach like that. 100% you're going to take their criticism more off the bat. Whereas in my personal life, there's people that could criticise me and I go, yeah, sweet, no, I wouldn't even pay any attention to it. If this bleached, tinted eyebrow lad to the next to me goes, nah, actually, you cocked up there. It's the first person I go, sweet, actually, I'll take that on board.
You take it on board.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, whether it's at a local level or whether it's at an international level, whether it's seniors or whether it's youth, expectations have to be realistic. And at the same time, I'm the first to then say, well, if your dreams aren't big enough, if they don't scare you, they're not big enough. But it's how you go about achieving all of that and managing the expectations and having a realistic idea, an open, honest, realistic idea as to where you are at. And, if your scores keep coming back in at 66, 67%, the bottom line is it's not a judge that didn't like you, which is often, that judge didn't like me. Your training needs to be better. And yes, the training needs to be better, but you shouldn't be demoralised by that. You've just got to think forwards and how are we going to make this better? What are we going to do to make this better? And again, put the ball in the rider court. What do they think they're going to do better? What exercises can they do to make whatever it is, that shoulder in, that medium trot better? And then what can they do to make that better? So they break everything down. And then once everything's broken down, you can just piece it all bit by bit together.
What we've talked about there has all come from years of experience in the sport. So take us back to the beginning of your journey and how you've come to where you are now.
Oh, well, I started in a riding school. And I started on my BHS exams, and I wanted to be a show jumper. And I was working towards, I think it was my stage 3 or my stage 4 exam. And there was a lady that used to come in and teach me, and she gave me 2 phone numbers. And one was a lady called Sarah Whitmore, and the other one was John Lasseter. And as she walked out the yard, she said, if you can get into either of those 2 yards, you're on a winner. And I rang John Lasseter, he was engaged, and then I rang Sarah Whitmore and she answered. And then it went from there. So I left Devon and moved to Kent. But my time in the riding school, that was... that for me gave me a really good grounding. It taught me to think on my feet. It taught me to be relatively independent. And most importantly, I used to struggle to communicate with adults, and it forced me to teach adults as well as children. It forced me to communicate with all walks of life and learn to adapt. What I now know, theoretically, through doing my level 4, at an early age, I was learning to adapt individual coaching styles to the person in front of me and not stay rigid.
It's really interesting you say there, but on a similar point is at the moment, riding schools are severely underfunded and they're all dropping at the moment like flies. And it also goes to show how important, to highlight how important riding schools are, that you don't just go there to learn how to canter a horse. There's so many life skills that you picked up there from different elements and the career path you ended up taking may not be the typical career path that someone else may take, and it's why it's just a highlighting point there of why it's so important that it is acknowledged that there maybe isn't enough funding for riding schools at the moment, and that they don't get the attention that's needed.
Absolutely. I think horses in general, whether it's a riding school or whether you're fortunate enough to have your own pony, equestrian, the horse, whether it be a dog or horse, it teaches you life skills. It teaches you about responsibility from an early age. It teaches you to think ahead. It teaches you to plan. It teaches you to be considerate. It teaches you to learn to, manage disappointments or deal with disappointments. At the same time, you get many highs, and hopefully I always think the horse is a great leveler. One minute you're up and you're sky high, and the next minute you're like, oh man, now that's gone wrong. And hopefully you have enough ups and enough downs that it balances out in the middle. And the horse is the best trainer. Listen to the horse. If you can keep your horse happy in its training, then you're doing a good job.
So on your route to becoming a List 1 judge, a UKCC level 4 accredited coach, there must have been some challenges that you faced along the way. What are they, and what are some of the hardest challenges that you faced on your journey?
Oh, challenges! They're always a difficult. Challenges. I think from certainly when I left home, I was very lucky. After I left Sarah Whitmore, I went to work for a nice family, a very nice family who are still excellent friends of mine, and they supported me whilst I worked, and I really worked. But they were always a good base, and they were still very, very good friends of mine, and my friends I've always held very close to me. In fact, he spoke at my wedding last year. And for me, everybody would bang on about a work-life balance, particularly my mum. Oh, you got to find time for you. Oh, you got to do this. But actually, I love my job. And I'm very, very lucky in that I have a lot of variety. I was selecting, I was chefing, I was judging, I was coaching, I was judge training, and doing my UKCC. There's always been so much variety. It was never the same day in, day out. And with my job, every person is different. Every horse is different. Every person that comes in, everybody's like, how do you do it? Well, as far as I'm concerned, the riders and the horses give me energy. I don't feel like I'm giving them my energy there because they're all different, and they're also, most of them are so seriously, enthusiastic, and they love their horse and their riding because they want to do it. And if you don't enjoy it, like you mentioned, Josh, if you don't enjoy it, you will give up. So there has to be an element that everybody has to enjoy what they do. If the sessions or whatever I do I find is not enjoyable, then there's no point in doing it. You will burn out. You need variety, and that also a little bit goes back to early specialisation in sport.
I remember we spoke about this at Felbridge.
Yeah.
You were the one that told me this.
Early specialisation in sport, seriously high burnout rate.
Just go into that a little bit for me. So
if you wake up every day and all you do is go in that arena, dressage, say from the age of, 8 or 10. This is what I'm doing, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And, we all know, you're striving for that 10, you're striving for perfectionism or the perils of perfectionism. Everybody needs variety, because if not, it will burn out. You will burn out. You will drop out. Don't get me wrong, not everybody, but there is early specialisation in sport, drop out. Whereas a lot of, the international youth riders also do other things. So they might play netball, they might play hockey, they might do athletics, they might do gymnastics. But horses are not their only sport. They do things on the side as well. And I think, again, it's a different, a different sport, but it works on different skill sets. It's more teamwork, with the horse. It's you and the horse, your coaching, your parents, and your own support team around you. And when you're playing like team sports like football, netball, hockey, you learn consideration, you learn to read the game, you learn to think of others, you find players that can help you, you find, tactics, ways out of that situation. Whereas with us, we're always an individual until you get to that team, and then you're put together as a team.
I think there's some similarities on that point of essentially overdoing the same thing and burning out or falling out of love with what you do. And with Harstep, we're very lucky that we get to speak to a lot of people when we do trade stands or any sort of public things, and we talk to them about their journey. We'll actually take the time and speak to people. We're not one of those, yep, sweet, thank you, on you go.
Yeah.
And we get to know our customer base, and we have extensive conversations, and it's been quite a theme I've seen where in this sport there's a lot of people that are working to do the sport, and there's a level of setting your boundaries and like closing your business door to your hobby / pro-am door, where they may be working on a yard, grooming, riding for other people because it's their job, and then find a bit of a mental and at times physical cap when it comes to maybe schooling their own horse or developing their own horse and doing their own thing. And we've had those conversations. I don't know if I want to stay into it. And I remember, I think it may have been Josh sort of said, well, take a step back from doing that as a job. Go and work in a post office or whatever, and you'll be surprised at the mental difference that you can have to approach. Because when you're crossing between that's business and financial, I need to do that, to I'm going to go ride my horse and enjoy doing that. There's no distinguishation. You can't distinguish between the two. It all blurs into one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've always had a hunger for knowledge and a thirst for it, if you like. And for me, I never really did days off. Like my days off, I'd consider going and practice judging somewhere or going and sitting in somewhere. I would always make the most of every opportunity that came my way. Or if I had a quiet day, I'd look in the diary and think, well, who's doing a clinic somewhere? Who can I go and watch? So effectively, I would then use my training days as my days off, which actually I still do that. But because I think everything is so varied, I don't teach the same clients week in, week out. I don't do the same thing week in, week out. Yes, I do equestrian. Yes, I do dressage week in, week out. But there's so many different threads within that it never feels like a job. And I think the day it feels like a job and that it doesn't make me smile, actually now I'm in a place where I could just sit back and go, actually, I just want to work part-time. Actually, I might retire in a few years. But at the moment, I still smile every day and I still absolutely love what I do. And on the back of that, I'm going to just keep doing what I do because I've never burnt out, because I've always given myself variety and also new challenges. Every step of the way, I'll achieve one thing and then something else will come around the corner. I'll think, yeah, okay, I'll give that a go. And okay, yeah, I'll do that. That's okay.
Because there isn't really another you. And I mean that there's not someone that's probably taken the route that you have in sport, but like focusing on someone your age being a List 1 judge, top of the board on coaching. A lot of people in this sport would probably focused on the riding and made a career through the riding. It's always been the main focus in the riding, whereas you've probably done a quite unique path in comparison to everyone else.
Well, I could never afford a horse. Yeah. I never had a horse. And then I could never really afford the time off to compete. And plus I couldn't afford to compete. Yeah. So, very early on, I learned from the riding school that I quite liked the coaching, and I was very into horse management, more so than the riding to begin with. And then, of course, ending up at Sarah's, I ended up learning a huge amount, and my first horse was a Grand Prix schoolmaster. So, it was a pretty good first horse. They say the best things are worth waiting for. So he was definitely worth waiting for, that horse.
Did you just do a dressage test one day and it was raining and you see the better off fuckers in the car and just think, you know what? I'd rather be that geezer beeping a horn.
No, what happened is at the time it was you had to have ridden at the level or trained, you had to have ridden and achieved the score twice at the level or trained somebody a combination at the level before you could upgrade. And I can remember thinking, right, good. Yvonne's now got her points at PSG. Great. Now, and there was another rider, Julia, I think, who I still, both very good friends of mine. Great. I can now upgrade to List 2. And then they both got points at List 2A. I was like, great. They can be my references. I can now apply to upgrade to List 2A. And then when Charlotte got her points at Grand Prix, I was like, excellent. Great. As a trainer, I can now, apply to upgrade to Grand Prix. And then something happened a couple of years ago and they were like, if you want to do this, you've got to go out and get points at PSG. And I went, is that it? And they looked at me and I went, oh, that's easy. I'll do that next week. 2 weeks later, you have to qualify at advance. So I borrowed a horse that I knew very, very well, jumped on it. It was like, oh my God, they'll see my name on a sheet. Went out, did the advance, qualified, and then went back straight out and got my points at PSG. So it was...
Wow. Was that weird being out competing for the first time in years?
Yes, I think what was weird is as I've got older, I'm nowhere near as brave. And I think from where I've ridden, when I started out, I would school probably or ride for 3/4 of my client base and teach a quarter. And then over the years, that's gradually flipped to 50-50. And now I'd say I don't ride that much. So I think for me, the biggest challenge was, oh my God, I'm not fit. Oh my God, I've got to get back up to speed. And, it was a little bit like, okay, remember, practice what you preach, use that corner, make sure it's in front of your leg, make sure it's to both contacts. So it kind of gave me a little bit of a reality check, but I still just got on and did it in 2 weeks. Yeah. So you don't lose your feel. It was more like, okay, you've got to sort your brain out, you've got to sort your body out, and you've just got to get, if you like, back up to speed.
Yeah, so that enabled you to become a List 1 judge. So like moving on to the judging side of things, I've been in the position where I've come out of a test many a times and been like, fucking hell, I hate that judge. I'll be the first to say that all the time. But obviously I appreciate they get paid pretty much nothing. But when you're relying on scores and you're getting paid to ride people's horses, it does put a lot of pressure on you. So how can the sport evolve on the judging side of things? Because I'm sat here going, where is the next generation of judges going to come through?
I think now, certainly a lot of my younger riders, I very much encourage them to explore the judging route, because it's been one thing that's really helped me understand the biomechanics of the horse and understand the training. So when I was at Sarah's and when I went to Germany, the coaching was very much you rode the horse through the rider. So actually when I left, it was pretty much, how do I get it on the bit? How do I get it in front of the leg? And for me, judging has very much put the theory and the depth of understanding behind everything so that I can then translate it in a very simple way through into my coaching. And it is having that depth of understanding and the knowledge and the experience that's gained over years and years that you are then able to put into judging context and judging words. So, certainly as a judge, I think we're not there as policemen. And I can remember Stephen Clark saying we're quality control, not policemen. And I think, that is really, one of our absolutely prime, one of our prime things as a judge is we have to maintain quality control. We have to, the riders need to look at the judge as being their critical friend. They are an independent assessor of where they are currently, where the horse and rider are currently at in their training.
Do you think on a general basis that is currently achieved?
I think judges put a lot of time into CPD and they are passionate about getting it right. You go on Horse Monkey and the judges, you host a judge training, they're like, when can we have more? They're all sold out. You put on stuff for coaches, they're never sold out. And the judges
Why do you think that is? Sorry to cut in there.
Because I think the judges want to do the best thing for the horse and for the rider.
Right. The coaches not making.
I think the coaches is it's not that they don't make the effort. I think it's got to be. So now through COVID, actually, there's a lot more stuff for judges that's on Zoom. And British Dressage have been brilliant in formulating a library of materials that, Vimeo links? That are sent out, and we as judge educators or tutor judges, we judge them, and then they judge them, and then we combine all our scores and we all watch the videos together. And the biggest challenge is keeping up with this library so that we're not constantly reusing. So British Dressage are filming a lot, but not only that, through the use of Zoom, it's very accessible. They can sit in their lounge. It can be in the evening. It can be in the afternoon, and it's cheap. Yeah, it's much cheaper. It's affordable. You don't need to hire venues anymore. We still do. Judge and coach days in person. Certainly like the Level 4 module day for the judges is also opened up to coaches, but it's normally always the judges that are first to book because they want to learn and they can afford the time off work. Whereas as a coach, I don't understand it, but I say I don't understand it, I kind of do. If they've got to give up a day's coaching to go and drive somewhere, then effectively they've lost a day's income to go and sit and do CPD. But I think it's got to be a balancing act. Yeah. And as I said, in my early days, my days off were CPD.
But it's quite funny because when Felicity Collins was on, we touched on that, how isolating it can be for a rider, let alone as well a coach, going from, you're giving your energy a lot to people and you're consistently driving about. I've been there when I did teach, but I was teaching because I was not a massive fan of it. That it becomes quite isolating with what you do. So for me, on paper, sometimes I think everyone gets stuck in the ways in the industry. Like, for example, like you say, a coach wouldn't want to give up a day's work. I would have done the exact same. I'd have been like, well, I can earn money today, or I go to a course. But actually, the benefits from going to these courses is actually huge. Yeah. Because it's breaking your routine, something that you've spoken on.
And it's different. It's variety.
Exactly. Variety to what you do.
And it gives you a different perspective on things. And you learn from everybody, and you learn, different skill sets, different ways of approaching problems, different ways of communicating. And it might just be one or two things that you take back. But, I was listening to somebody the other day and they were just talking about the outside front leg and a shoulder in. And I was like, I like that phrase. I'm going to use that phrase more. And, lots of just different phrases that can be passed on. And I think, judges are, like I said, if you understand the training, it helps you as a judge. But equally, being a judge can help you as a coach, because what it always feels like is not always what it looks like. And it's about, a little bit test tactics, if you like, and a little bit, educating the rider into the correct frame. And can they see the headpiece as the highest point? The rider might go, oh, and that feels horrid in my hand. And it's like, well, actually now it's not behind the vertical. And actually, tactically, and it's bringing different aspects into everything that we do. And not only that, I think judges now, they are so keen to learn about the training and understanding the fundamental basic importance of the correct way of going, not only for horse welfare, but for the longevity of the sport. And the horses that come out on top are normally, we are judging the training, not the paces. Yes, obviously, quality horses with good paces. If you've got two equally well-trained horses, the one that's a bit more off the floor will come out on top. But an average horse that's trained very well will always come out, or should always come out above
hard work beats talent every time.
A quality horse with its legs everywhere that's very tense and crooked. It's about judging the training, because without correct training, there is no solid foundations to build on. And then it's a bit like building a house. If you don't have, the rhythm, the suppleness and the connection or the contact, you'll bluff your way through to elementary, but when you get to medium, those cracks will appear and that house will start to topple down.
Like you've touched on the judging and how much effort is being put in by the judges right now. The way technology is evolving, how can you see it being evolved to help the sport grow and make the life easier for judges? Because I remember there was Dane Rawlins at one point. He had the concept that was trialled, I think, at Hicksted, wasn't it? What, starting at 10 and then having to hit a criteria. So is there any way that you think that judging will evolve? Because at the end of the day, like we touched on it, but it's still down to personal opinion, and it will differ between, if you have 20 people in a room, it's going to differ.
Yeah.
So how do you think, like in time, that this can be, well, it's also made easier for judges as well?
I think we all try and, like you said, we all try and sing from the same hymn sheet, but somebody will have a bit more of a personal preference of, you know, activity and energy. Another judge might have a bit more preference of one being completely swinging over the back. Another one might forgive one that goes a little bit on the shoulders at times if it stays in, you know, there's so many, but sometimes we come to the same mark for different reasons, and it doesn't matter that anybody's right or anybody's wrong. It's about, you know, everybody listening to each other and the rider, you know, picking up the sheet. And I always try and encourage the judges to write what they want to see more of. So instead of, for example, as a judge, instead of me saying tight, I would say needs more suppleness, because that reads better and it's more encouraging. And I think, again, like the summary, you know, if we're really honest about it, riders, they pick up their sheet. They don't look at that top bit. The first thing they grab is their collectives in the summary. And I think even, you know, riders do not get out of bed and go, oh, I'm going to ride a bad test today. They just don't do that, you know. But horses are horses, and it doesn't always go the way we want it to go. But it's about, you know, a judge, through their depth of knowledge, being able to not recognise the symptoms, but pinpoint the root cause of the problems so that they can be helpful to the rider. So they would summarise, they would, you know, obviously state, you know, the positives, the good aspects, but they also need to make very clear to the rider the areas that need further development to aid their training.
It's a really interesting point on dressage, and I mean, I'm coming from my position on horses and knowledge, and this whole podcast, there's certain questions I've wanted to ask, but I'm like, I don't know if I'll ask that correctly, or I might ask that
just ask
in
it
a non-sensitive way. And we've just touched on it, and I really like the way you phrased it, because the way I was going to phrase it, it's a good job I'm not a dressage rider, because I probably would have ruined my career with the way I would have asked it. But one thing with dressage compared to everything else, what I think is quite interesting is if you're show jumping and you have a pole down, you have a pole down. It's plain and obvious.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same with eventing. If you don't correlate that score over the period of days,
or get in the time, you know, it's very black and white.
Black and white. Dressage, it very much comes down, like we're saying, to preference and opinion. And it's one thing that I've heard from people that I say that it sound like it was Josh. It wasn't Josh. Although I wouldn't be like, I probably have heard it from you as well. Is also a bit of a shitty biasy that comes with it, and it's a lot of people. It may be on just a rider just being salty because they didn't get the mark they wanted. So there are two sides of the story, but I do also hear it's like, oh well, the judge doesn't like me.
Oh, that's classic.
And
they don't like me. And sometimes my riders come back to me and they go, the judge didn't like me. And my answer to them is, the judge doesn't know you. And actually what they're saying is the judge didn't like my horse's way of going.
Right, okay.
And that is my answer to the riders, because it's not a personal thing, because the judge doesn't know them. The judge is there like I mentioned earlier, as an independent assessor. And, you know, it's about how we say things and how we write things down. And you can have a disastrous test, but provided the judge is on the side of the rider, you know, obviously the horse welfare comes first, but if they, have empathy for the rider when things aren't quite going their way. It's how that comes across. And going back to where you said about starting at a 10, I think that is one of the common things that is used. You start at the 10 and you work your way down. And what is important for riders to recognise and for judges to recognise is to be able to start at a 10. You've got to be able to correct really good training, correct training. And B, you've got to know what a 10 of a trot is, a 9 of a trot is, an 8 of a trot is, a 7 of a trot is, a 6 of a trot, a 5 of a trot.
And most riders probably can answer that for
they
you.
can't answer that. And, if you think for every mark the judge gives, a third of the mark is the quality of the pace, a third of the mark is the way of going, and a third of the mark is, say, the technical presentation. Was the circle, say, for example, the right size? Was it a bit big, small? They've got those three things to analyse to come up with that one mark every movement. And if you think of it like that, then you start to get a bit of an idea of, well, the way of going was really good, it was accurate, but the trot was a little bit limited. So therefore, it's a 7.5 or a 7, not quite an 8 or an 8.5, because it wasn't as, the trot didn't really swing through the body enough or something like that. So, that's what the riders really have to take on board.
How do you think you can make the relationship between riders and judges better?
I think that's about being open to talk. So I think, I sit on the training committee as well as the judges committee. And one thing that I'm quite keen about is that a lot of the judge training is actually opened up to coaches as well as riders. So like, for example, the level 4 module day, we cover everything from the basic paces. So we'll have two horses come in, show, walk, trot, canter, and we'll compare. Then a trainer, a good trainer will come in and show how to develop the paces. And then I would say as a judge, talk about the quality of the paces and what we would like more of for a higher mark. And then, we would then discuss, and the coach would then coach them through certain movements and how to make them better. I would then talk from a judge's perspective as to the marks I would be giving and why. And, everything is so interlinked, the coaches, the riders and the judges. And the more we can open up, say, these level 4 days to the riders and the coaches, the judge training, some aspects of that are now opened up to the coaches and the riders, the more it will start to blend together, because already through the use of breakout rooms, there is now a much, much more cohesive judging community where they've had to discuss between themselves, and they've had to, make, if you like, new friends within colleagues. And, and through this Zoom, I've opened them up and so-and-so in the break's gone, oh, hello, do you remember me from here? And, one's in Scotland and one's in Cornwall. And it's really good to hear that now, if you think coaching is a isolated environment, judging, being the only one in that box, hoping and praying that you don't miss a mistake or something's being videoed and, I hope I better not get this wrong. I hope I don't get this wrong. Judging is probably more isolating.
Is that becoming
coaching.
More and more frequent then? Judges being reported with now technology, with cameras and stuff like this. Is that becoming a common thing, or?
That's not. I'm not involved. I don't know how many complaints go into the office. But what I do know is that the mistakes that I've made, I remember.
Yes.
And there was
taking
one.
Josh Hill on for one, probably the biggest.
No, certainly as a judge, and I can remember, a number. It's going back a few years. It was when the Nationals was at Stoneleigh, and I can remember I was with 4 other really good judges, and I was nowhere near, and still am not anywhere near as experienced with them. And it was like first, 8th or 10th, and I was like, oh, I got that a bit wrong. And again, the horse wasn't that floored, and that was my first lesson. You judge the training.
Yeah.
You do not judge the quality. You absolutely judge the training. And if the ground could have swallowed me up, and if I could have driven home that night and never judged ever again, I would have done so. But I had to judge the next day, and I was like, oh. But the next day, it was absolutely fine. And you know, there was another incident recently at a Premier League, and I was sat in my hut, and I judged the 7-year-olds, and then this other big class, and I can remember I was sitting there going to my right, and I think it was horse number 38 in the class. It's not done it. It's not done it. And I was on the side, and I'm just going to my right. It's not done it. And I can remember looking at this horse, just going, "It's not done it." And she's going, "It's not done it. Give me a mark." And I just went, "Well, give it a 2. It's not done it." And actually, the other judge was like, "Well, what do you mean? It did do it." So my eyes are just completely, for some unknown reason, known to man, had just completely zoned out temporarily, because this horse clearly did it, and I was just repeating, "It's not done it. It's not done it. It's not done it." I mean, clear as day. You look at the final printout of the scores, and my marks were really close. Right. But if you looked at the individual scores, you'd be like, "Blimey, what was she on there?"
Yeah, of course.
And I can remember it's good, and I was like, you know, what on earth happened?
But that is the thing, unfortunately, it's like human error, isn't it?
It was absolutely human error. And I was the first, you know, and I saw, you know, another person that I trust, and I just went, "Oh, Jesus Christ." I said, "God knows what happened to me." I said, "I could have sworn to God it didn't do it." I said, "Maybe the shutter of the hut temporarily come down." I said, "I couldn't tell you." But absolutely, I remember out loud going, "It hasn't done it." And the other 2 judges, luckily, had seen it, so the ride wasn't.
Well, I remember, I hope Sarah Jane Lanning doesn't mind me mentioning her name in this, but she cost me a national title because it was 3 judges up at the Nationals, and I got a 7 for my walk pirouette from both of the 2 judges, and she gave me a 4 and said I stuck. And I came second by, I finished second by 1 mark, so I was like...
And we do make mistakes, and I promise you, every mistake I make like that, I can rattle them off, because
I love Sarah Jane to pieces.
I love her, and you know, it plays on your mind. And like, if I've been a bit low on somebody, I'll drive home really miserable. If I've been a bit kind to somebody, I won't drive home as miserable. I'll be like, "Oh, I was a bit too kind there, but I really liked it. That was fine." But if I feel like I've done a rider an injustice and not found enough marks for them, then I drive home with a bad taste in my mouth. Yeah. Because I feel bad that I haven't done the right thing for them, and even though I don't know them, I kind of feel like I've let them down. Yeah. But I could list a few occasions where I have made a mistake, and now I'm pretty honest. You know, if I know the rider, I'll speak to them. And there was another occasion recently. Again, you looked at the printout, and I was like, "Jesus, I've given her a 1 and a 4, and the other judges have, you know, been a bit higher." Yeah. And she just went, "Oh, Leanne," she said, "why are you worrying?" She said, "The changes were a disaster." She said, "It slipped one in at the end of the half pass." And I was so relieved I actually spoke to her, because on paper I would have looked like I was the wrong one. But actually she was like, "No, Leanne, absolutely, it was a disaster. The changes were a disaster. Don't worry about it."
But I love that, because I remember there's been times where I've come out and I've tried to approach judges, and I'm talking a few years back, and I won't say names, but they haven't wanted they haven't wanted to talk to me or give me the time of day after. And I think you saying that there, again, all of what we've touched on behind the scenes is being honest and open and communication. And I think, like you say, that is for a rider to know that they could actually come up to a judge and actually question them on certain things. It's only going to improve the dynamic of relationship between rider and judge. Yeah. So that's awesome, and I would have loved for that to be able to feel like I was in a position where I could go, because the 2 times that I had previously tried, I had been shut down for that and hadn't had the opportunity to ask why that happened. But like, there's things that obviously behind the scenes judges are really working hard on improving the judging capabilities and moving the sport forward. How does dressage move forward? Because from an outsider's perspective, how does it make, like, obviously if watching the same Grand Prix dressage test for a lot of people isn't entertaining, like, how will this continue?
No, because they don't understand it.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. So how, with the sport, are we going to create the awareness and open the door to keep it? Because I believe that in 12, 16 years time, it may not be an Olympic
No, I think anymore. A lot of people are very concerned about that. You know,
so I think the question is how do you modernise British dressage?
Well, that's a very, very open topic, isn't it? But I think, certainly it's a bit like eventing. How many watch the dressage and the show jumping, and how many watch cross country day? I think the tickets are barely, what were they, £25, I think, for dressage day, and there's something like 47 on cross country day. People like the excitement and I don't just think it's dressage that's in danger of not being an Olympic sport. I think it's all equestrianism.
I think show jumping have done amazing thing with GCT. I think the Global Championship Tour, GCT. They've done an amazing thing there. It's brought so much, going over to Miami, jumping on the beach, and you were up at London GCT.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic. My concern as someone that's always been involved in dressage is how does it continue to grow and evolve? Like, you wouldn't be able to do like the GCT for dressage.
It's got to be accessible to all. And without, the youth foundation that we've got, which does cater now for all levels. I mean, Claire's worked really hard. Isla planted really, really good, solid foundations from which Claire then took over. There is something now for everybody. So even like in the past, the A squad riders couldn't then come back down and they'd almost be excluded. Whereas now, Claire and her team have brought in young horse tests. So there is something for everybody. And provided we keep the youth, provided they keep the enjoyment in the sport, they are the future. But with terms of the public, social licensing for a start, horse welfare has to take priority, rough riding, misuse of aids will not be tolerated, and it is not tolerated by judges anymore. Yeah, it has to be.
Do you think there should? This might be very extremely controversial, but do you think there should be a weight category that comes into it? Because there are, in the nicest way, sometimes you do look at someone riding a horse and you're like, that is animal welfare issues. Again, you weigh too much to be riding that horse, and it's more commonly seen in dressage more than show jumping and eventing.
I think you've got to look at the whole picture. Yeah. I think if you think of, I could sit in this chair like this and I'd weigh my overweight 10.5 stone, but I could sit in the chair like this and have self-carriage in my position and be able to ride. So I think there's a lot to be said of the rider's ability to sit tall and have poise and move with the horse, as opposed to a complete novice rider that doesn't understand any of that. That is what I would call a dead weight on a horse. Yes. So I think you have to take into consideration not just somebody's weight, but how they balance on the horse, how they hold themselves, and their riding ability and their feel. Also, I think look at the horse. We have guidelines in place. If the horse appears to be struggling, and you're allocating, marks of insufficient and sufficient consistently for more than 4 or 5 movements, then you can ring the bell and say your horse is struggling today.
Do judges feel supported enough to do that?
Yeah, they do now because of the new 10% weight rule. But it's not a rule; it's a guidance. But as from the judges, from the welfare aspect, as judges, like I said, we have clearly got these guidelines. If the horse looks irregular and you think it looks lame, you can ring it out. If the horse looks in pain, if there's a health and safety issue, if it goes ouch and goes bolt upright and you think, oh my life, that ride's going to topple over, or you can, you would eliminate the horse. So horse welfare takes priority. And like I said, if it's really struggling at the level and you're giving consistently low marks, again, you have the jurisdiction to be able to, ring the bell and unfortunately eliminate the combination.
I'm going to go back on one of the points you just said there, Leanne, and respectfully allow me to disagree. Here's my dressage knowledge coming in. He said about on like the weight side of it, depending on how people sit, whether it's a dead weight, and I do partially agree because form is everything. Yeah. But if that dumbbell is, there isn't a dumbbell, it's a metaphorical dumbbell. Is 10 kg and you pick it up, it's 10 kg. Yeah. If you squat and stand it up, you use legs, still 10 kg. Yeah. So on the animal welfare point of it, if someone is vastly not in the best physical condition they can be for the welfare.
Yeah.
That doesn't change whether you sit correctly or not.
It would reflect in the horse's way of going, in the way the horse presents itself. So if the horse looks to be struggling and is not able to perform the movements with lightness and ease, then we have the grounds, if you're giving those low marks because the horse is showing signs of struggling, then we can eliminate the combination.
What you're saying is that you are relying on getting feedback from the horse. If you see someone that's overweight,
look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
You look at the whole picture. You look if the horse is tripping, stumbling, if the horse has got a hollow back, if the horse is bracing, then that is all, or if the horse is struggling, then that is clear indications that the horse is that there is a bit of a welfare issue.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it depends on the individual situation of the horse. And again, the stamp of the horse compared to the right. Is it a native type? Is it a Shire cross? Is it a Clydesdale cross? What is it? So I do think, you can't just say that person's too heavy for that, or you have to take the whole picture into account. And
you just would have thought that British dressage being so hot, especially now on animal welfare, that regardless of the whole story, it's something they would have implemented at a basic level, at a foundation level.
BD have implemented it.
Oh,
they are the leading light, the shining light behind it.
So there is like weight categories in terms of that. That's what I was going to say.
No weight categories.
No, but they have issued very clear guidance out to coaches and riders, and it's in the rule book. Before British Showjumping, before British Eventing, and before the Show Pony Society.
What's out of curiosity? What was the guidance on? I know you probably don't be able to recite it word for word, but
it's something like it's to do with the percentage.
I've really put you on the spot on reciting. I do apologise.
No, I do know this because I've read it umpteen times. It's 15%. It's something like between 10 and 15% of the rider's weight, the saddle and the bridle. You cannot exceed more than 15% of the rider and
as
the
a
tack
combination,
weight against the horse.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And they got, I think it was World Horse Welfare and Newmarket actually did tests for scientific studies to come up with this statistic for this guidance.
Yeah. Wow, I did not know that.
Well, it's touched with Ollie Fletcher that will be out by now, is the show jumper that won the gold medal last year. Can't remember his name. It was a foreign rider. He weighed everything, even down to his saddle, his stirrups and everything. So obviously even in that he's taking that much like
athlete approach
into weighing stuff. It makes a huge difference.
It does, but I think that goes back to whether you're planning to do a regionals or whether you're planning to do an international. That goes back to leaving no stone unturned.
Yes.
That goes back to the depth of the detail of your plans. That goes back to if your horse is long in the back, have a saddle cloth that comes a little bit further out the back of the saddle to help make the picture look a bit shorter. It's about the whole picture.
Type of plats to make it look. Yeah,
exactly. It's about literally going into every little detail. What was it they were saying about bikes and the paint they use on bikes even to earn that extra little bit, and it is about leaving no stone unturned. It is about planning your competition schedule, your arrival time, your recovery time, your ensuring the horse is fit enough to do 3 days on the trot, ensuring that you've actually got a freestyle prepared before you're selected to ride at your first international. A lot of people fail at that one. And provided, I think, with any challenge, whether it be competing, whether that be at an areas, at a regionals, nationals or internationally, whether you're preparing to, like this, I wrote notes, provided you've prepared as best you can be, you stand a better chance of succeeding because in your head you are relatively clear and you know what you're doing.
As you've done it all, haven't you? You've been a judge, you've been a rider, you've done everything there is. What would your advice be to an aspiring dressage rider?
Okay, I would say determination. Not everybody has an easy, straightforward path. You know, social media, Facebook gives this illusion that everybody's always up high in the clouds, sailing along, and behind the scenes, I'm sure they're absolutely not. Listen to everybody. It might not be what you want to hear, but then reflect and take a balanced view. Look at every situation from various angles. Remember, again, talking about various angles, judges' marks will depend on where they're sat in the arena. You know, the view from the side is very different to the view from the front. And take every opportunity that comes your way. Don't turn down opportunities.
Really
Grasp them with both hands.
Find
time. If you want to do something, don't use the excuse, I don't have time. Make time.
Strong. I'm going to leave it on a really upbeat pitch for you, Leanne. While I've been sitting here, I've been pondering ways, how can I personally fix the modernisation and entertainment? No, don't laugh, Carl. The modernisation of dressage. And I've come up with a solution. So I'll be interested to hear what your opinion is on this. Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah.
For horses.
Yeah.
TV show.
Yeah.
Bunch of celebrities.
Yeah.
Look, they're not going to be Josh Hill level riders.
Yeah.
But you give them 5 weeks training prior. You then put them on TV. Live bands, like Strictly. People come. You do it in like a nice hoist-like setting. Lights, the whole lot of it. Needs a bit of a budget. But mainstream people are going to watch the celebrities do the dancing on the horses with the guest singer of Tom Jones. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to get live judge and feedback. People, it's going to help the sport. And I think that's something that might make it interesting.
Like Marianne's Strictly Come Dressage.
Yeah, with the Rein Foundation.
Yeah, it's already in place.
Yeah.
Is it?
But not with the celebs.
Yeah, not with the celebs.
So you need celebs and you need, that needs to be on TV.
Yeah, there you go.
So that is copyrighted on the 2nd of the 9th by Ash
I think
Howes.
Marianne Horn's already copyrighted the Strictly Come
I
Dressage.
will have the infringement pattern tonight.
But that is a really good idea, and it is thinking outside the box, and it is, again, like music. Everybody loves music. It is about live streaming that out to people, and it is things like that will keep the sport alive.
There's 2 freestyle tests to me that I'll never forget, and that is Charlotte's at London.
Yeah.
For the Olympics, and then you got Edward Gower and Totalas.
Yeah.
With the chimes and the pirouettes.
I've got both. I asked Sally Martin to do me I've got a big oil painting of both Totalas and Vellegro in my house.
Wow, those are for me.
And then she's copied them off and sold them.
Yeah, those 2 horses were...
Yeah, both amazing.
Yeah, incredible. They've done more for the sport than probably anyone ever will, won't they?
But again, it was the partnership, wasn't it? You know, it was
the
partnership.
It
was the partnership of Edward and Totalas, and it was the partnership of Charlotte and Vellegro. And it was the partnerships that were so very, very unique.
My best favourite dressage test is the one from Josh Hill that has yet to be done, which I think again comes down to music choices that are allowed in dressage tests. Is freestyle to music. I love
freestyle to music.
I need to get back to riding first.
Yeah, I love judging it.
We'll put this idea to you afterwards, but yeah, there's certain things with music and stuff that I think ways that at a basic level that could be implemented to make it a bit more exciting to watch. But yeah, I can't wait for you to do that test.
Me neither.
We'll have to let you back on. I tell you what, I'm going to put, first of all, Leanne, thank you so much for coming on.
No, you're very, very welcome.
Has been, for me, very insightful because I get a lot of my information from
people like me.
Thing number 2. So for me to ask and get corrected on certain questions is really insightful for me because going forward it helps my development, having not been it and as veterans as the both of you are. So thank you. And I really feel that there's a lot of people that have really benefited from this episode on the words you've had to impart with. So yes, no, thank you.
Well,
very
hopefully
much
I've given a bit of an insight as to the challenges as a judge. And we don't sit there being judgmental. We sit there thinking,
So you changed my perspective.
absolutely,
most definitely.
Because from what I hear from the outside is, and again, I've not grown up in it.
They don't like me.
Well, yes, Leanne, basically.
But they don't know you to not like you.
Exactly, but they go, the judges don't like me, it's very biased, it's this, that and the other. And I go, dressage sounds very corrupt. It doesn't sound like it's doing, but actually to sit down and hear the other side of it, it actually makes perfect sense, and I can understand where their perspective has come from. Yeah. But actually what the perspective is on the other side, it makes perfect sense.
And I think also, there's more and more team events going on. And when there's a team event, whether it's at local, regional level, at the interregionals, the home international, the home counties, the inter-counties, there's so many, different avenues now. The associated champs, the retraining of racehorse champs. You always have a panel of judges. So like you said, you might have two that like you and one that's a little bit lower, but that's down to their perspective and what they can see. But, certainly being on a team and developing, making friends and having the support from your other teammates, I really do think when everything comes together and you're all there supporting each other, great things can happen.
Who's the head of British Dressage? I imagine there's some... Jason Braun. Yeah. Jason Braun, I'd love you to come onto the podcast. I think this is a public.
Jason's great.
I'd love Jason to come on.
He's the voice of reason.
Jason, I'm asking you personally. I'd love him to come on the podcast. I think it'd be really interesting to hear from BD's perspective on what's going on, where it's going. I think for so many people it would be so beneficial.
I mean, all of the office staff are absolutely just so experienced in their own roles, and again they work as a team and they're always looking to move forward. I mean, certainly Charlotte, she's always thinking ahead, planning ahead, bringing new people in, again, like even from the apprentices, the apprenticeships with the youth, they're monitoring where that person would like to excel in channel. Then the office will keep a tab on that, and should an opportunity come up, they will put them in touch. Charlotte is very good at thinking forwards and ahead, and always ensuring that there's new blood coming into the sport, and she is very good at making sure that the sport evolves. And Lou Jones, the rule book, whatever you need, she's absolutely fabulous as well. But the whole team are absolutely exceptional, and they work tirelessly. I absolutely promise you, every single person in that office is an asset to BD. They work non-stop.
Oh, well,
so I think Jason, Charlotte, Lou, any of them up there 100%. would be Winnie from her marketing. She would also be good. They would all be brilliant for you to have on this.
Well, I welcome them with open arms. Josh will get in contact, because if you get a message from me, it might be a little bit, who the is this geezer? But no, honestly, thank you so much for coming on, Leanne.
Absolute pleasure.
It's been really insightful.
Thank you guys for listening. And make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, share all the clips, because the quicker this grows, the better guests that we can get on, and we can continue to grow.
Yeah, well, the analytics show are very, very lovely to look at. However, make sure you are actually subscribing and putting on to set reminders, because that way you will notify yourself when we do a next episode. Keep sharing, keep liking. Really, really appreciate it. Leanne, thank you again for coming on.
Pleasure.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much, Leanne.
Oh, lovely.
Anytime.
Oh.